saw that when we look at the things that kind of parallel the protests that were taking place then and the things that are also taking place now, is we're seeing that the protests are about how can we provide justice and true justice in terms of equitable policing, but it's also highlighting the fact of race and racism. And the fact that race is one of the most reliable predictors of life outcomes across several areas around life expectancy, academic achievement, income, wealth, mental health, maternal mortality. And so this is really what our society is asking us to grapple with. It's this idea that until we can deal with the causes, we're going to continue to deal with the effects. And when we're talking about the effects, we're talking about this long lineage of names that Freddie Gray just happens to take a truly unfortunate participation.
As Congress is now grappling, especially the Senate, with what to do about the differences between the House legislation and the Senate bill, and we're hearing a lot of pushback now against Senator Tim Scott's Republican alternative because it is not mandatory in banning chokeholds. What, from your perspective, what should they do? Should they filibuster the Republican alternative? Should they try to compromise? Any possibility Congress is finally going to deal with this?
I think that any proposed legislation that does not deal with not just the immediate things that have to be addressed. So, for example, the things like the banning of chokeholds, the banning of no-knock warrants, looking at qualified immunity, and the fact that the bar for even getting police officers even under investigation for improper activity is so much higher. The introduction of civilian review boards. I think that any legislation that is going to be meaningful in this moment has got to be legislation that also includes how are we looking to look at this problem holistically, and that include all those measures. I also, though, believe that if we're going to actually address some of these other larger crucial issues, it is going to mean how are we thinking about the other elements of justice that are going to be necessary. That when we're talking about things like, the budgeting of police departments, I think we have to be very clear about the fact that budgets are moral documents. And they're very clear understandings of what it is that we will support and what it is that we'll use our taxpayer dollars for. So, for example, when we're talking about what it means to be moral document, I think it does mean that we have to decrease this idea of this hyper-militarization that we have within police forces. I think it also does mean that we need to have honest conversations about the fact that in Baltimore City alone, for example, the Department of Health, their budget is around $42 million. The police department's budget in Baltimore City is $509 million. So how are we prioritizing a balance? And what exactly is it that we're asking our police officers to do? Because in many cases, we're asking these officers to police things that aren't necessarily activities that they should be policing. And so as we're talking about these proposed bills, it is the concrete elements that we have to be able to address. And it also is breaking it down to the state and to the local level about how are we thinking about the budgeting that we have, and then what message is that sending, both about the role of police, but then also the role of these other facets within our society that we're then pushing off the police to try to be able to solve.
I want to ask you also about the monuments we've seen today and last night, the conflict in Lafayette Square with the statue of Andrew Jackson. Our colleague, White House correspondent Jeff Bennett, has researched the statue, and it was built by an enslaved man named Philip Reed. We don't have there's no known picture of him, but Philip Reed had been, quote, purchased for $1,200, and he was the sculptor who made the Andrew Jackson statue, and ironically, also the Statue of Freedom on top of the U.S. Capitol. What does all of this say about our society? And I don't know what the solutions are. What do you think?
I think the fact that we have an enslaved person who then uses their time and their talents and their energy to create a monument and a statue to someone who was a slave owner, someone who was one of the architect behind the Trail of Tears, not just the enslavement, but essentially the attempted genocide of Native Americans. I think we have to understand that we are using taxpayer dollars and taxpayer efforts to celebrate a part of history that should not be celebrated. And I think it's important for people to understand what exactly that means when these monuments went up. Most of these statues actually went up post-Reconstruction. Many of these statues coincided with Jim Crow. And so if we are going to have a real process for this country, which is necessary, a true truth and trauma process, to understand that much of where we are right now comes from the history and from whence we came. And for us to be honest about the role that race has played in every single facet of our society, part of that must also mean which statues that we erect, which things and monuments do we use taxpayer dollars to clean and protect, and how do we think about our past in relation to how we're thinking about our future.
Wes Moore, as always, it's wonderful to hear your insights. Thank you for everything, what you do with Robin Hood, this wonderful foundation. Thanks very much for being with us. And right now in Atlanta, the funeral service of Rayshard Brooks is about to begin. Brooks, of course, is the African-American man who was fatally shot by Atlanta police in an incident that started with him falling asleep in his car in a Wendy's parking lot this month. The police said he was inebriated. The service at the historic Ebenezer Baptist Church, where Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. served as the pastor. Rayshard Brooks leaves behind his widow, Tamika Miller, and his 4 children.
Someone who takes care of yourself. So when it comes to screening for colon cancer, don't wait. Because when caught early, it's more treatable. I'm Cologuard. I'm non-invasive and detect altered DNA in your stool to find 92% of colon cancers, even in early stages.
Tell me more.
It's for people 45 plus at average risk for colon cancer, not high risk. False positive and negative results may occur. Ask your prescriber if Cologuard is right for you.
I'm on it.
That's a step in the right direction.
So, who here struggles with clogged gutters? Let's take a look at some damage caused by clogged gutters.
Clogged gutters did all that?
Absolutely.
That looks like our house.
Who climbs ladders to clean their gutters?
Dad, I keep telling you it's dangerous.
Climbing ladders is too dangerous. Once our ladders go up, you can put yours down forever.
So how does it work?
Leaf Filter's 3-piece system filters out leaves and debris, letting water flow through freely.
Do we need to replace our gutters?
Great question. Actually, Leaf Filter could be installed right on top of your existing gutters.
That will save a lot of money. Do I have to pay for an estimate?
No, it's free. And you'll get a free gutter inspection too.
We're sold.
Call 833-LEAF FILTER or go to getleaffilter.com for your free gutter inspection and estimate. Call or log on today and save 15%.
We're Carvana, the company who invented car vending machines and buying a car 100% online. Now we've created a brand new way for you to sell your car. Whether it's a year old or a few years old, we want to buy your car. So go to Carvana and enter your license plate, answer a few questions, and our techno wizardry calculates your car's value and gives you a real offer in seconds. When you're ready, we'll come to you, pay you on the spot, and pick up your car. That's it. So ditch the old way of selling your car and say hello to the new way at Carvana.
Guys come in all shapes and sizes. There's no normal erection for everyone, but there is a normal for you. If, like thousands of other guys, you find that your erection doesn't look so normal anymore, it could be an addressable medical condition called Peyronie's disease, or PD. A curved erection with a bump that bothers you is not normal and should be checked out by a urologist, because you don't have to accept this as your new normal. Find a urologist at learnaboutpd.com.
I'm Randy. And I'm Dave. And we're Bombas. We sell socks. But not this one. Because this sock is designed to be donated. Socks are the #1 most requested clothing item in homeless shelters. So for every pair of super comfortable Bombas socks you buy, we donate this pair to someone in need. And thanks to you, we just donated 30 million of them, which makes this the greatest sock never sold. Give a pair when you buy a pair and get 20% off your first order at bombas.com.
Voters are heading to the polls in Kentucky today to choose the Democratic candidate to run against Mitch McConnell, a primary that was rescheduled because of COVID-19. The Democratic establishment's initial choice for more than a year has been Amy McGrath, a former Marine pilot who now finds herself in a tightening race against Charles Booker, a progressive black state representative who has shaken up the contest in the aftermath of the recent anti-police protests. On MSNBC earlier, McGrath and Booker slamming McConnell.
Mitch McConnell's been there a long time. He was elected 2 weeks after I was born. So he's been screwing us my entire life. We need to uproot structural inequity and structural racism. And we're going to end generational poverty. And we'll beat Mitch McConnell to do it.
I'm somebody that stands for social justice and for Black Lives Matter. We have support, and I've had support from the very beginning of this race from all 120 counties in Kentucky. That's incredible. I don't think Mitch McConnell's had that in the last 6 years. And that shows you the momentum here to get rid of him.
Joining me now is Msnbc correspondent Tremaine Lee. The latest episode of his podcast, Into America, is about the Kentucky primary. Tremaine, it is so good to see you again. Let's talk about this primary, because this is a completely different race than the one where Amy McGrath was an early Biden supporter. She has a lot of establishment Democratic support. AOC has been supporting Booker. He's a more progressive candidate, and he's obviously got the impetus of the anti-police movement against him, behind him, rather.
Andrew, yeah, thank you so much for having me, Andrew. It's good to see you as well. Charles Booker has really come in and shaken up this race in very conservative Kentucky. But the shooting death of Breonna Taylor, who was shot in her apartment in the middle of the night by police, really sent an unrest, obviously, through the community. But he was out. Charles Booker went out there in the streets and protested. And so while Amy McGrath is the establishment candidate, and while 500,000 people have already voted, another 88,000 have already voted early, the polling shows that Charles Booker is really surging ahead, really riding the momentum from these nationwide protests. And so while it is very close, Charles Booker has really come out of nowhere and shaken it up in a way that few expected. Unless you talk to folks on the ground and say, there's always been this ripe opportunity to take advantage of all the folks who haven't voted, who haven't registered, but now see an opportunity to get into electoral politics, or at least support candidates.
But there's always the question of voter suppression and a controversy over the largest African-American district having only one polling place on Election Day.
That number is... It's even worse than it sounds. It sounds crazy. Normally, that Louisville district has over 200 polling places. 200. Now down to one. Now, they moved it to a big arena, so they're hoping that at least they have the capacity for a bunch of folks. But when you talk to people, there's real concern that there'll be a replay of what we saw in Georgia. Those hours-long lines, the people getting frustrated. And many people will say, you know what? That's the entire point for a lot of people. If you can frustrate the electorate, if you can make people stand in line and make the barrier to actually participating in the election high as possible, then maybe you'll be able to chip off a few thousand here, a few thousand there.
And I know, Tremaine, conventional wisdom would have it that Amy McGrath, as a Marine colonel, a middle-of-the-road Democrat, would have a better chance of picking up Andy McConnell, centrist seats. Maybe some Republicans would peel off who are not Trump Republicans. But conventional wisdom is really out the window in this year. We don't know what's going to happen, do we?
That's right, Andrea. The campaign, the Booker campaign has a saying, from the hood to the holler, meaning from the inner city to the rural areas. They believe that they can take their message of unity, especially now where people are grappling with the nature of systemic racism and police reform. There's this broad kind of cross-racial, cross-cultural coalition forming, and their campaign really believes that if they can unite folks who haven't typically voted in the same manner, even though it's very conservative Kentucky, they might actually have a real shot. But again, that mountain is high. Mitch McConnell, the old stalwart of the grand old party, he's a force in that state, but these folks are riding a lot of momentum.
Stay tuned. As they say, we'll have all the results tomorrow. Tremaine, thank you as always. And you can listen to Tremaine's podcast, Into America. Download it now wherever you get your podcasts. And that does it for us for this edition of Andrea Mitchell Reports. Thanks for being with us. Please stay safe. Remember to follow us online on Facebook and on Twitter at Mitchell Reports. Chuck Todd and Katie Turr pick up our coverage after a break.
This was when I noticed how white my son's teeth were and how yellow mine were, and I needed to make a change.
My smile's yellowish or dingy, and it definitely made me self-conscious.
I can't magically become younger, but I can certainly look younger. And I'm doing that with Smile Actives.
Introducing Smile Actives, the teeth whitening breakthrough that gets your teeth white and keeps them white.
I eat the blueberries, I drink the coffee, and I know that Smile Actives will keep my teeth white every day.
What makes Smile Actives different is that when added to any toothpaste, its revolutionary PolyClean technology activates to
transforming into a powerful microfoam that goes into the enamel surface to lift and remove stains.
You need a simple way to whiten your teeth, without strips, without trays, without going to the dentist. And it was about time that a product was developed that you would be able to do that with just brushing.
Look at the power of Smile Actives on years of food stains and even coffee and wine stains. Smile